So now, first of all, happy February 1st. Um, as I mentioned last week, we have about 6 weeks to go in the trimester. So um, we're almost at that halfway point, or we're right at that halfway point. Um, just a few reminders for this week. We're going to finish up chapter 4 with systems of linear inequalities. So now we're going to graph two inequalities and shade, and our solution is going to be where they overlap. We'll talk more about that as we get into notes. And then Thursday, we will have a review assignment and quiz. And then we're done with chapter 4. So if you have chapter 4 work out, work really hard, try to get that done. That work will remain open after the quiz, but we will obviously next week be starting with new material. So anything you can get done this week will help. That way you're not trying to do two different topics to get everything done. I think everything else is pretty straightforward. Let's get started. All right. So just a review from last week's material, last Thursday's material. If we have an inequality in standard form, the first thing we're going to do is look at the inequality symbol to see if we have a solid or a dashed line. So I'm going to just draw a line right here. If it is greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to, we'll graph with a solid line. If it is just greater than or just less than, we'll have a dashed line. Remember, in standard form, we have our x and our y on the same side of the inequality. So there are a couple of choices for graphing. We could either use what we called method 1 or the cover-up method to find the x and y intercepts. That works really well. Or you could rearrange the inequality to get it in slope-intercept form, get the y by itself. We called that method 2 on Thursday. One thing to be careful of, if you rearrange to get the y by itself, if you have to divide by a negative number, you have to flip the inequality. So if it was greater than, it flips to less than. If it was less than, it flips to greater than. The third step is always then to determine which side of the inequality we're going to shade. And so if we use the cover-up method, then we would need to pick a point that's not on our line to see if it makes the inequality true. If it does make the inequality true, we shade on that side of the line, the side that that point is on that we chose. Again, I like to choose 0, 0 because it's easy to work with. If that point is not a solution, we go to the other side of the line, the side that that point is not on, and we shade there. If instead you decided to rearrange and get the y by itself, then you can use the shortcut. Y is less than or equal to, we'll shade below the line. Y is greater than or equal to, we shade above the line. And as I said, we're going to do now two inequalities. So we're going to actually have to go through that process twice. So this inequality was the last one in last week's, last Thursday's notes. So if we just walk through the solution, in this case, I would probably solve this one, get it in the y is less than form or greater than form. So to get the y by itself, subtract 2x from both sides. The negative stays with the y. -4 minus 2x, we can't combine those because they don't both have x's. We'll talk about that as well later. So we have this inequality, negative y is less than negative 2x minus 4. Divide everything by -1. Here I divided by -1, so I change my inequality. To graph, I would graph the y-intercept, that's the y-intercept. And use my slope. While I'm graphing these points, if you could, in the chat or just unmute yourself and tell me which type of line am I going to have to draw here? Is it going to be solid or is it going to be dashed? So one way to remember, if there's a solid line underneath our inequality, we'll draw a solid line for our graph. Here, there's no solid line, so it's not going to be solid. It is going to be dashed. Yeah, excellent. Excellent. So when I draw my line, I'm going to draw a dashed line. Like so. And now shading. So here I've got y is greater than, so I know I need to shade above. If you use the intercept method and you had to pick a point, I will show you, walk you through that as well. And that's a fine way to do it. You could have done it that way as well. With the intercept method, you would have found 0, 4, and -2, 0 as your intercepts. And I would always use 0, 0, excuse me, if it's not on the line. So 0, 0, and if I plug that in to my original inequality for x and y, I get 0 is less than -4. That is not true. So I don't shade the side that 0, 0 is on, I shade the other side. So again, you should get the same graph either way that you draw the line. All right, so solving a system now of linear inequalities. How is the graph of a system of linear inequalities related to the solutions of the system of inequalities? So again, just some vocabulary. A system of linear inequalities, two or more linear inequalities in the same variables, just like a system of equations. Solutions of a system of inequalities would be all the ordered pairs that make all of the inequalities in the system true. Graphically, the solution is the overlap of the shaded regions. All right. So here we have two inequalities. So we have a system, and we are going to graph them. So I am going to start with the first one, and I'm going to graph it in red. The second one I will graph in blue. And I'm going to graph, shade, and then look for the overlap. So they're both in slope-intercept form. For the first one, I have 8 as my y-intercept, using the slope -3/7. So again, I always go down. So 1, 2, 3, and then right 7. And I'm not going to be able to do more than just that one point because of the limitations on my graph here. Will that first one have a solid line or a dashed line? You can unmute or let me know on the chat. So will this equation or inequality, sorry, will that inequality have a solid line or a dashed line? Yes, excellent. Total agreement on the chat that it will be solid. Again, there's a solid line underneath it. So I am going to draw a line. through my 2 points. And now am I going to shade this above or below the line? Yes, excellent. Because it's less than, I'm going to shade below. And I'm going to shade it pretty light with a pretty light color because I still need to graph that other line. And so if you're working on paper, highlighters work okay. You could use colored pencils, you could use crayons, you could use a pen and a pencil, anything that's going to give you a different look. The other thing you can do, now I'm shading it in, but you could just use a pen or a pencil and like make lines like down to show that one and then make them in a different direction to show your second inequality. And then the overlap is a little bit easier to see that way. My second inequality has a y-intercept of -3 and a slope of 8/7. So up 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right here. Is this one going to be a solid line or a dashed line? Go ahead and either chat or unmute or, excuse me. All right, got a couple of answers here. And yes, it is going to be dashed. I think I already, oh, no, okay, blue. And am I going to shade above or below? Yeah, I'm going to shade above. So above the blue line. And the solution is where the two shadings intersect. And I was hoping that my pink would be a little bit darker. So now you can see, I think it's pretty clear where the overlap happens. So my solution would be in this area right here. And then it would continue off into that space, but there where all of my solutions are. So the kind of the left hand part or left of where the two lines cross. All right, let's try this one. I'm going to use my black pen for this one and my blue pen for this one. So again, y is greater than negative x plus 2. So y-intercept of 2, slope of negative 1. Is this going to be a solid line or a dashed line? Excellent. It is going to be a dashed line. And am I going to shade above or below? Ugh. Try that again. Go ahead and answer that in the chat. Above or below the line? Excellent. Above. Now I'm not going to shade it in black because that wouldn't allow me to see much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shade it in yellow. All right. My second equation in blue, y-intercept of negative 2, slope of negative 1. Is this going to be a solid line or a dashed line? And am I going to shade above or below? The inequality is less than, so I'm going to shade below. And this doesn't happen very often, but if you notice, there is no overlap. Because they don't overlap, we have this system with no solution. No solutions, because the two shadings do not overlap. Again, doesn't happen very often, but I wanted you to see an example where it happens so that if you run into that, you know exactly what's going on. All right. I'm going to move my graph over this way a little bit, make it a little bit easier to see. So again, if I graph this one in black, this one in blue, and we'll be able to work with it. This first equation, y is less than 2x plus 0 is really what it's saying. So we have a y-intercept of 0 and a slope of 2. Is this going to be a solid line or a dashed line? Yep, dashed line it is. I think I've got the dashed line still. Yeah. And should I shade this one above or below? Less than, shade it below. All right. This other inequality, y is greater than -3. Notice there's no x. So you could think of it as y is greater than 0x minus 3. Anytime there's only one variable, we're either going to have a horizontal line or a vertical line. If y is our variable, we're going to have a horizontal line. And in this case, that horizontal line is at the y value of -3. If it was x is greater than or x is less than, then we'd have a vertical line at whatever that x value is on the x-axis. All right, solid line or dashed line? Another one that's going to be a dashed line. And should I shade above or below? Our inequality is greater than. Greater than means shade above. And so again, I think using the blue and the yellow works out pretty well, because when yellow and blue are combined, they make green. And so you can see the overlap pretty easily. So our solution would be this upper right-hand part of the graph. All right, so I would like you to try this try now. Graph that inequality. And we'll come back in just a couple of minutes and see how you did. All right, so just again, graphing these. Y-intercept at 8, slope of 2. Because it's less than or equal to, we are going to have a solid line. And because it is less than, we will shade below. Second one, y-intercept at -1, slope of 1/2, up 1/2. Because it is just greater than, we will draw it with a dashed line. And because it's greater than, we shade above. All right. We could have an inequality that's in standard form as well. So we're going to take a look at a couple of examples of that. So again, I'm going to graph my first line in blue, my second line in black. And I will actually go through both methods. So this one, I will do the cover-up method. The next one, I will solve to get the y by itself. So whichever method, again, they both work. But the first inequality is already in that y slope-intercept form for an inequality. So intercept at 4, slope of 1/2. solid line. And it's greater than, so we shade above. My second equation, using the cover-up method. So to find the x-intercept, I cover up the y. And I think of, I'm going to move this just for a second. What I'm doing is I'm actually working with the equation and now I cover up the y and I solve. So my x-intercept is the point where y is 0. And my x value is -3, so I can plot that point. To find my y-intercept, I'm going to plug 0 in for x and solve for y. So I'm going to cover up the x. Now again, one of the things to be careful of, that -3 stays with the y. And I can draw that line then, and it's going to be a dashed line. For the second equation, I can't just go by the inequality. I need to pick a point. So again, I'm going to pick the point 0, 0. And this says if 0, 0 is a solution, then 0 would be greater than -15. I like it. I think 0 is greater than -15. So I can shade on the side that 0, 0 is on. Excuse me. Try this again. There we go. So again, my overlap is in that upper right-hand corner. This one I will solve the other way. I will solve that second inequality for y and then graph it in the slope-intercept form. So the first one already in slope-intercept form, y-intercept of -3, go down 5, right 3. I could also go up 5, left 3. Graph that line. Which is going to be a solid line. And shade below. Now again, this one's getting a little steeper, so if you're not sure what below is, again, you could pick a point, or you could just say, well, let's see. I need to be below this point right here, so it's got to be down in this area. If I want to solve my second inequality for y, question, Kayla? Subtract my x. Divide by 3. Now this negative x over 3 is the same as negative 1/3 x. So negative 1/3 down 1 over 3 down 1 over 3 down 1 over 3. um, graph that line. It's less than, so I shade below. And again, our solution in that lower left-hand portion there. All right, your turn. Again, I'll give you a few minutes. Graph that system. And we'll come back and talk about it in a couple of minutes. All right. So I'm going to move this first equation. I'm going to rewrite it below. Just because I need to do a little work with it. Because there isn't a number in front of the y, I would probably get it in that slope-intercept form. So I would subtract 2x from both sides. Remember, I can't combine any terms on the right-hand side because they don't both have x's. So it just has to be that expression, negative 2x minus 3, then divide both sides by negative 1. Oops. I divided by a negative, so I do have to change my inequality. Y-intercept at 3, slope of 2. Inequality is greater than or equal to. So we are going to draw a solid line. Greater than, so we shade above. One thing with this inequality that's in standard form, if you try to do the cover-up method, notice your y-intercept is 3, that's okay, but your x-intercept would be negative 3/2. So again, when I get fractions, I don't like them. It's not as accurate as using the slope-intercept form. The second equation, negative 2 as my y-intercept, slope of 3, 1/3, sorry, up 1/3. We're going to draw a solid line. Less than, so we shade below. All right. So I am going to put you in your breakout rooms and I will come and talk with you in a minute.